choice, will be the face, rather, of that new Republican Party after former President Trump, should he be elected to a second term. I want to bring in, please, if I could, our political director, Finn Gomez. Finn, it's squeeze in here. Yeah. Make sure we got plenty of room. We're all on the camera. Good. It's all great. We've got the right tie and everything.
That's right. That's right.
Finn, share with the audience your thoughts about JD Vance.
I think there was a lot of speculation that it would be JD Vance in the last few days. We did see, we had one of our reporters, Shauna Mazzell, out in Cincinnati, Ohio. We saw like a heavy security detail over the last couple of days, especially after the terrible events that occurred in Pennsylvania. We saw, a really heavy security detail, something we did not see with some of the other contenders. But I think with JD Vance, as you said, it's somewhat of a legacy pick as well. This is Trump can only be in for one term, as we know. He already served one term, as we know. So, this is someone who can take the MAGA reins, as you said. And if you recall, back in 2016. The Hillbilly Elegy was the book that he wrote. And it was awarded, highly heralded, and it really almost served as a blueprint and sort of a textbook to understand the base that helped propel Trump to that victory in 2016.
Essentially, for those who are not familiar with it, Hillbilly Elegy tells the story about J.D. Vance's extended family, and is the story of economic isolation, seeing industry and economic opportunity drift slowly away from many parts of Appalachia, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and also, and he writes very compellingly, movingly, painfully about how that sense of economic isolation, the receding of economic opportunities led to bad decisions, addiction and other things, other problems that he said were not only troubles for his family, but for many of the people he knew in the region he grew up in. Yet, at that time when Hillbilly Elegy was being celebrated, J.D. Vance then said, Trump doesn't know anything about this. His rhetoric speaks to these people, but they're going to be let down by former President Trump, then a candidate seeking the nomination in 2016. As I mentioned a moment ago, he called his rhetoric rhetorical heroin.
Rhetorical heroin, yeah.
Those days, as I mentioned a moment ago, Finn, they're gone, and they are now connected at the hip politically, and in a few hours here on the convention floor, I believe we are expecting unanimous acclamation of this convention and the delegates, former President Trump's running mate.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to note, he is a senator of Ohio. He's a junior senator of Ohio. There has been some softening in support for President Biden in those important Rust Belt states, in those blue wall states that he needs to win to get back, to win re-election.
Right.
And I think strategically, the Trump people think this is something I've been told this, that they believe that they can really do well. And I think with J.D. Vance, they feel they can do even better.
Let's break this down for the audience. Right now, former President Trump leads in the polls. He has an electoral map advantage. That is a fact. And the one strong remaining electoral path for President Biden to win re-election is dependent, 100% dependent on Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. It is no accident that in his Truth Social post announcing J.D. Vance as the running mate, former President Trump listed those states. You can bet, and I can bet, Finn, that J.D. Vance is going to be circulating throughout those states relentlessly in this campaign. And we know that the Ohio delegation is coming up next. If it's all right with the control room, why don't we go down and listen to the floor in this moment. Let's go. Let's go to the floor.
Iowa, 79 delegates.
Madam Secretary Alex Triantafilou, Chairman of the Ohio Republican Party. I stand here today with my friend Bernie Moreno, who's going to retire forever, politician Sherrod Brown, and deliver a win to the United States Senate. We proudly cast our 79 votes for President Donald J. Trump
and JD Vance.
Pursuant to the announcement of the delegation and the rules and procedures of this convention, Iowa, 79 votes, President Trump. America, Samoa, 9 delegates.
So we heard Finn, we heard from the Ohio delegation, not only the delegate votes for former President Trump, formulaic, and then the call, hey, and JD Vance.
Yeah.
It's part of the electric moment here. The delegates on that floor are getting the information, and they just heard it called out, sort of officially, sort of semi-officially. It's an exciting moment.
It is, and I think even prior to this moment, I mean, speaking to some of the delegates on the floor and speaking to some delegates just arriving over the last couple of days, you know, there is a sense, this palpable sense that they feel that they've turned a corner in the race. They feel there's momentum for Donald Trump. Frankly, after the debate in Atlanta and even after the events in Pennsylvania, they feel that they have this sense of momentum. We've been hearing from some of the delegates who have been repeating that now sort of very famous phrase, if you will, from Donald Trump after he was injured when he was shot at the attempted assassination. When he turned to the cameras and said, "Fight, fight, fight," and you're hearing that. You're hearing that through on the floor. That it's breaking out sort of.
And it'll be interesting, Finn. That we have, by the way, just to keep everyone track of what's going on the floor, 3 more states to work through the roll call process. But it'll be interesting, Finn, for all of us to sift how that message of fighting is conveyed rhetorically.
Right.
JD Vance jumped right into the fray in the immediate hours after the assassination attempt on former President Trump, essentially saying the rhetoric of the left brought us to this traumatic and potentially lethal moment.
Right.
Lots of other Republicans held back and didn't and now there's been a call from the top of the Trump campaign,
yes,
from former President Trump himself, and others, Steve Scalise, the House Majority Leader on the Republican side, to say, no, let's bring it down. Right. What will JD Vance sound like here? What will others sound like as they talk about the fight? What is the fight about? What is the fight for? And who is that fight against? I'm going to be sifting, as everyone here will be, how personal that is or non-personal that is. Is it policy? Is it personality? Is it names? Is it party? Is it ideology? What is it?
No, I think that's a great point. And we did confirm that the president and the former president and the senior members of his campaign have told the organizers, have told the speakers to tone down the tenor following Pennsylvania. Tone it down. We don't need that rhetoric. We want to focus on unifying the party. And I think that's something that you will likely hear from JD Vance when he does address this crowd later this week. But you're right. Like, how is that going to play? It's playing well here on the delegate floor, with delegates on the floor. We know that, right? He's speaking, frankly, to the choir, right? But outside in those battleground states, in some of those states where that rhetoric may not be as accepted, like, how does that happen? So, but I do think that.
Finn, let's listen to the floor. The process is about to wrap up.
Florida. Florida, 125 delegates.
Madam Secretary and everybody in this great city, on behalf of our entire family and on behalf of the 125 delegates in the unbelievable state of Florida, we hereby nominate every single one of them for the greatest president that's ever lived, and that's Donald J. Trump, hereby declaring him the Republican nominee for President of the United States of America.
Pursuant to the announcement of the delegation and the rules and procedures of this convention, Florida, 125 votes, President Trump.
a celebration that lasts throughout the year. So bring your good time and your laughter too. We gonna celebrate your party through. Come on. Celebration.
Over the top, you see it on the big screen here in Fiserv Forum. That is the Republican National Committee and attendant delegates' way of signaling to the nation and to the world that former President Donald Trump, for the third consecutive Republican convention, is the nominee of the party to seek the presidency in 2024. And that process was brought to dramatic conclusion by the Trump family. Eric, Don Jr., and Laura Trump, all there representing the Florida delegation. And we should note that the pick of JD Vance on the ticket for former President Trump is an internal victory for Don Trump Jr., a fierce advocate, very close to JD Vance, who'd been suggesting to his president, not to the former president and his father, for months that JD Vance was the best pick.
Right, he's been the biggest lobbyist, biggest champion, his biggest cheerleader. And if you recall, in 2016, it wasn't really until the family met with Mike Pence and his family before Donald Trump finally decided that it was going to be Mike Pence. Mike Pence wrote about it in his book, in his memoir, and it was really that moment, but it was really the approval of the family. And so when we heard that JD Vance was being really championed by Donald Trump Jr. and his family, I mean, it was a good indicator for that, which a good likely pick, that it was going to happen.
No doubt, a very big moment for the Trump family, and we should remind ourselves, and this is something that everyone will evaluate, and history will take very careful note of. For politics and former President Trump, now the nominee officially of the Republican National Party, it's a family affair.
It's a family affair.
Deeply involved and enmeshed in his family, and the considerations, the big decisions flow through the family. And that collaboration has taken on visibility every single year of Trump being involved in the political life of our country.
Laura Trump, as you just mentioned, his daughter-in-law is literally leading the RNC.
The Republican National Committee, right.
Correct.
Exactly. Let's go down to the floor and listen to Mitch McConnell, the Senate Republican leader, talking about Kentucky.
Pursuant to the announcement of the delegation and the rules and procedures of this convention, Kentucky, 46 votes, President Trump.
Kentucky's 46 delegates are in. We missed Mitch McConnell there. I'm sorry about that, folks. I was talking too much. That's a common affliction of mine.
But he got booed. He got booed. Did you hear that? Some of the folks booed him.
Oh, yeah. Well, yes.
Yeah.
Let us just say that the relationship between Mitch McConnell, the Republican leader in the Senate, and former President Trump has had its ups and downs.
That's for sure.
Lindsay, I want to throw you back to you in New York.
Sure. Thank you, Major and Finn. Back here with Anthony Salvanto here. So as we continue going down, Hawaii is up right now. Anthony, help us understand the significance of this moment in history and the formality, pomp and circumstance. What leads us here?
Well, this makes it official. This process started, of course, back during the primaries when Donald Trump basically cruised through those primaries, right? And his name was actually the only one placed in nomination because he's the only one that even won enough states in order to do that. So the other big difference here, Lindsay, is that compared to 2016, and as Major mentioned, the third consecutive nomination for him, Republicans are even more excited about having him as the nominee than they were back then. And that just shows another data point of how much this party has become his party. We have tracked throughout that Republican voters said they not only were voting for him, but they wanted the party to show loyalty to him. It really is in many ways unprecedented, at least in modern polling, the amount in which that this party has oriented itself around one person. You see it in the platform. You see it in their approach. You see it in the number of Republicans, nearly half, who say that they are not just supporting Donald Trump, but members of the MAGA movement. All of that comes together, and in this, they'll continue to do the roll call of the delegates. He'll get them all, but that's where we are.
And you see it in the RNC itself. The RNC is Trump's RNC. He's essentially remolded it in his image.
Oh, yeah, very much so. And I think that's reflected not only in the platform, but also then in the approach. And then we're going to talk about the down ballot races. We're going to talk about watching Senate candidates. We saw this during their primaries. Are they running to be someone that Donald Trump will endorse, right? Are they running for someone to appeal to that MAGA base? And then, of course, the question becomes, how do they broaden that out? How do they broaden out that appeal? All of that comes out of and speaks to who's running and where they're running, and the RNC as well.
You mentioned the primaries. We did see Nikki Haley have some minor successes, not enough to get her competitive enough with Trump, but she has released the delegates, those that she can. It's my understanding some states it doesn't matter. Can you help us understand that?
Yeah, states each have their individual rules. Now, the Republican Party, by and large, says that its delegates, when they're selected, they are bound to vote for the candidate that won them. And that assures, of course, in this case, Donald Trump getting those delegates. There are a handful of states where Nikki Haley or whoever won them cannot just release them. They still have to be bound to the winner. And what I suspect will happen here is that they will go ahead and vote for Donald Trump in any case, because the party's going to want to show that unity. But it also speaks to something larger. Throughout the primaries, we were often talking about how Nikki Haley was getting, let's say, a quarter of the vote in some states, even when she lost. And there were suspicions, well, could he bring the rest of the party over and together? By every indication we have in the polling, he has. So that even folks who voted for Nikki Haley in the primaries and are Republicans, Donald Trump is now getting 95% of Republican voters. That's different, though, from independents who crossed over and voted for Nikki Haley in the primaries, from even some Democrats who may have crossed over into the primaries for Nikki Haley, which was underpinning some of her support. But by and large, you're seeing a unified party right now.
What is the polling showing about down-ballot races? Because, of course, one of the criticisms of current President Biden is that he will essentially drag the ticket down, impact down-ballot races as he battles his own politics and within members of his own party. What does the polling show us about how down-ballot races are looking, control of the House, control of the Senate right now?
Well, and that's important because we're going to see a competitive Senate control and we're going to see a competitive House control. Often gets lost in all the talk about the presidency. Two things on that. One is that, by and large, the Democratic Senate candidates have been running ahead of Joe Biden in these battleground states where we have polled. That gives them some confidence, and yet, because Joe Biden is not getting the same amount of Democratic enthusiasm for turnout as Donald Trump is from Republicans, you've got to think that Democrats are looking at that and going, well, wait a second, if the top of the ticket is not inspiring that kind of turnout, that could affect, perhaps negatively, Democratic Senate and House candidates. And I think that's going to be a big topic of discussion, certainly something that we do see in the polling.
Okay, Major, we'll go ahead and send it back to you.
Thank you so very much. Thank you so very much, Lindsay. I'm joined here in Fiserv Forum by Nancy Cook, senior national political reporter for Political. Nancy, your impressions of the afternoon and the JD Vance news.
Well, I think that the JD Vance news is not hugely surprising. We've known that he was going to be, he's been on the short list for a while. He had huge support from the Trump family. Don Jr. really wanted him. And he just has like a group of operatives around him who have really been pushing for him. I think that.
And he's been auditioning in a very public way. And look, ladies and gentlemen, when we talk about auditioning, that's not a derisive way of describing how former President Trump thinks about these things. He really does think in ways where he wants people to prove themselves on his terms.
Absolutely. And Vance really has proved himself the last few weeks. He was responsible for setting up a huge fundraiser in California for former President Trump, which brought in a bunch of money and also sort of bringing along the crypto industry. He has been an attack dog on television, at multiple key points of that campaign. And you just can't discount that. And also, he's young. I mean, I think the Trump campaign feels like he will stack up really well in the vice presidential debate against Kamala Harris because he's young, he's a Marine, he's very good on TV, and he's very sharp on his feet.
Talk to me about the fundraising angle, because Peter Thiel plays prominently in JD Vance's political pedigree and is a possible pathway into financial resources that the Trump campaign has identified as necessary and might now have a better access to.
Absolutely. JD Vance has ties both in Silicon Valley, but you have to remember that he also worked in private equity for a while. And so, it's sort of a signal to donors in finance who have been reluctant to support Trump, although we do see them coming coming off the sidelines, that, you know, their VP pick is sort of one of them at least.
And a access point in the future, possibly. And Finn Gomez and I were discussing this. I'd like your perspective, Nancy, for President Biden's reelection campaign. No three states are more central to the Electoral College map at this point, as we understand the map, than Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. It is my sense, in the mere moments after this announcement, that there's going to be a bus that JD Vance is going to be on that's basically going to just circle those three states over and over and over. And it's going to be relentless, grassroots JD Vance in those three states, in addition to former President Trump. But what you do with the vice presidential pick is you sort of assign a political task. And the task at hand is to move into those states, it seems to me.
Absolutely. And I know just from talking with Trump world sources that, you know, part of the calculation was who could help, which vice presidential pick could help them win over voters. And there was a sense that if you had picked Senator Rubio, he would have helped with Hispanic voters. But JD Vance, they felt like could really help them lock up the Rust Belt and those swing states that you mentioned. And I think that that was a huge part of the calculus as well.
How much do you think his age is a factor in this for the nation? 39 years old. Very short stint in the United States Senate. We learned this weekend of the vulnerabilities, the potential for terrible things happening in this country in a political context. Everyone's talking about pulling back from that, but the specter looms over this entire campaign. It will not possibly not loom over this campaign until it ends.
Absolutely. And he is, you know, he's just 39, as you said. He's very young. You know, he has a young family. And I think that that will be, you know, that is a way to signal to Republican voters, you know, if anything did happen to former President Trump, you know, there is someone young who could step in. Not just that, but I think that, you know, Trump can only serve one term and really wants to sort of set up a successor. And that's what he's going to do with Vance. I mean, Vance is going to be sort of the MAGA movement successor to him for 2028, when there's also a really strong bench of Democratic governors.
No question about that. And as this convention begins to play out, and I want to let our audience know how things are going. We're working through the delegate roll call. It's all formulaic now. We saw just a few moments ago over the top. It's all official. But there are some delegations we're going to be preparing to listen to. We're going to listen to the North Carolina delegation, the Arkansas delegation, and the Virginia delegation, because those who will announce their delegates figure prominently in current Republican Party politics. Mark Robinson in North Carolina is the Republican nominee for governor. Sarah Huckabee Sanders, Arkansas, sitting governor, former press secretary in the Trump White House, and of course Glenn Youngkin, the governor of Virginia, who, Nancy, I don't know if you picked this up this afternoon, but there was a little bit of last-minute buzz around Glenn Youngkin.
There was. I thought, well, that could just be a real surprise.
That could be a real surprise, and it could be like Virginia. That's going to be this electoral play for the campaign. Didn't play out that way, but it was clear that there was last-second Youngkin buzz here in Milwaukee.
Well, not just that, but you have to remember that Youngkin will be done with his term. You know, he will be done with his gubernatorial term. And so I could see him getting a job in the Trump administration at some point. You know, not the VP pick, but, you know, some sort of cabinet post.
It's worth pointing out, to pick up on Nancy's point, that in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and this is something that Virginia's always had in its modern era, it's unusual. Governors only serve one term.
I know, right?
I mean, it's a really big deal.
It's very unusual. It's like you learn the job and then you're out.
And then you're out, exactly. So we will be waiting for those delegations when they come up. But in the meantime, Nancy, as we started our coverage, I said, welcome to a national party convention like no other in the modern era. I mean, we just can't overlook. We can't sort of like, oh, well, that was yesterday. No. What happened on Saturday in Butler, Pennsylvania is a trauma that will flow through this convention and will flow through the Democratic National Convention in certain ways, things that they might have contemplated saying that they won't say in the ways that they were thinking about, and the remainder of this campaign. It was such a shocking set of events, and we're going to get the first sort of expression of those events, how they're internalized by the Republican Party here, but the nation will continue to internalize this until November 5th.
Absolutely, and we saw sort of a bipartisan outpouring for former President Trump. You know, everybody sort of coming out and saying, oh my gosh, this is so horrible. We're so sorry this happened to you. And I think it is a moment, you know, a source told me it's a moment for Trump where he has a huge amount of sympathy And just politically, I think that they are going to try to use that this week to, appeal to new voters who may have discounted him, swing state voters or white suburban women who they've had a problem with. Their need to expand their coalition beyond the Republican primary base. And I think that sort of building on this theme of unity that we've seen Trump talking about on Truth Social will extend throughout the week as they try to do that.
And I think the most obvious manifestation of that relook and that emphasis on at least party unity came yesterday, when the former president's campaign and those leading this convention reversed course and invited Nikki Haley, who was not to appear here, who was not disinvited, but wasn't even in the conversation about being invited. Now she will have a primetime slot on Tuesday.
Absolutely.
What do you think that tells us?
Well, I think it tells us that they are trying to appear like they're rising above sort of divisiveness and hatred, coursing through the political
and their
discourse.
own internal disagreements. I mean, remember, famously, during the primaries, former President Trump referred to Nikki Haley, former governor of South Carolina, served as his first UN ambassador, as bird brain.
Right, for weeks.
Dismissively, yes.
Well, I also think, they are really underwater with white suburban women who feel really put off by the abortion restrictions that the Republican Party has espoused over the last 2 years and the overturning of Dobbs. And I think that, having Nikki Haley on board is also, an attempt to try to appeal to that group.
Interesting in that light, JD Vance doesn't help much there. JD Vance has a very strong, and this is the orientation, this is their phraseology, pro-life position. And in Ohio, when there was a referendum on this very question, Ohio amended its constitution to make room for abortion rights in a kind of a surprise result. The magnitude, not necessarily the ultimate result, but how large that majority in Ohio was. So JD Vance doesn't necessarily help in that part of the Republican Party communication.
But I think so much of their strategy right now is to expand the coalition by appealing to young black men and Hispanics. And I think JD Vance can help with that because he is also young. He's very online. He's an attack dog. I think he will carry the president's message. And so I think he will, build on that.
Nancy, hold on for just 1 second. I want to go back to the floor to talk to Ed O'Keefe, who is moved from Ohio to North Carolina, the ever intrepid Ed O'Keefe. Ed, take it away. Oh, well, that was a misread of the situation on the floor, Nancy. Ed O'Keefe is probably intrepid as ever, probably moving. And when you're moving, ladies and gentlemen, the microphone sometimes goes with you, sometimes it doesn't. This is what live television is like, an ever-evolving event like a national party convention. So, Nancy, continuing the conversation. Anything else about this first day that you're looking for, that you're going to be sort of analyzing tonight as this moves into the primetime hours and we get out of the official party business, convention business?
Well, what I'm looking for is, each day sort of has a theme. Right. And so today they're really talking about the economy and what they're dubbing as wealth. And so I'll just be interested to see how they talk about that. So much of their message has been, Biden has been terrible on inflation. But I'm curious to see, if that message sort of expands beyond that. And also if they talk more about what Trump would do in a second term if he's reelected on the economy, rather than just sort of bashing grocery prices under Biden.
And that's an interesting observation, Nancy. I'm just being handed a note very quickly from my producer, Arden Fari. So, again, we're in live television. This is ever evolving. JD Vance, the Ohio senator, got a call. The note has been handed me. I'm reading the note, so follow with me, folks. JD Vance, the Ohio Republican senator, got the call from former President Trump 20 minutes before the Truth Social post. That's an indication, Nancy, of the what I've come to expect in the Trump world. Things happen quickly, and things happen in a very tight sequence, entirely driven by former President Trump.
Absolutely. And, even until, I got here on Saturday, even until then, I think Trump was still having conversations with the candidates, up until that rally in Butler, Pennsylvania about, what they would bring. He was still sort of interviewing them, and he was still competing. And my reporting shows that, he didn't really let Senator Rubio or Governor Burgum know that they were not the picks, also till right before that. Like, everybody was clued in just like really 30 minutes before the Truth Social.
And the point to make there, ladies and gentlemen, is not only does former President Trump drive this process, and everyone around him knows he drives it, but he drives it in his way to, and this is a skill that he has developed, and the country, at least for the Republican Party, has fully embraced. He understands how to build drama and how to leave things unresolved and how to have things sort of build into a kind of mini crescendo. This isn't the ultimate crescendo. Trust me, in the next 3 days, 3.5 days, we'll have more crescendos here. Mark my words. But this is a mini crescendo entirely directed by the former president.
Absolutely, and he was just building suspense throughout it. And, I feel like, there's a chance that we may see him later today in the arena, in which case, that will be a very suspenseful moment. He will be out in public since his assassination attempt.
Right.
And
Nancy, if I had a vast fortune, which I don't, I don't even have a nominal fortune, but whatever fortune I might possess, I would bet all of it that he will be here tonight, the former president, in one way or another.
I would too.
To electrify this convention, to personify his sense of, I survived, I'm here, we're together, and we are going to take this moment and launch this convention in a way that I know the former President Trump will want to think of as memorable and want to convey visually as memorable. I want to go back down to the convention. We are one delegation away. We're going to listen in. We'll go through that first delegation. Then we're going to listen to North Carolina, Arkansas, and Virginia. Let's go to the floor, ladies and gentlemen.
Donald J. Trump.
Pursuant to the announcement of the delegation and the rules and procedures, the U.S. Virgin Islands, 4 votes, President Trump. North Carolina. North Carolina, 74 delegates.
Madam Secretary, I am Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson, and God willing, I will be the next governor of North Carolina. North Carolina is the Tar Heel state. North Carolina is the home of the longleaf pine, and North Carolina is indeed, woo, the state that is and always will be first in flight. Mr. Chairman, on behalf of the state of North Carolina, I am directed that the state to cast 62 votes for America's Braveheart and the next president of the United States of America, Donald J. Trump, for president, and 12 votes in accordance with the rules.
North Carolina, 62 votes, President Trump, 12 votes to be cast pursuant to the rules and procedures of this convention. Arkansas, 40 delegates.
Madam Secretary, Chairman Wadley, I am Joseph Wood, Chairman of the Republican Party of Arkansas, the natural state, the land of opportunity, home of the 47th Governor, Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Yes. Also home of the National Federation of Republican Women, Julie Harris, Johnny Cash, Al Green, and the Little Rock 9 Civil Rights Movement. We cast our 40 votes to continue to fight and save America with Donald J. Trump. Our votes for Donald J. Trump. Woo Big Louie!
Arkansas, 40 votes, President Trump. Virginia, 48 delegates.
Madam Secretary, on behalf of the great Commonwealth of Virginia, named last week by CNBC as America's top place to do business. Home to 850,000 of the greatest Americans, our military and veteran heroes. Home to Washington,
Madison, Monroe, the first governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia, the voice of liberty, Patrick Henry, and home to Thomas Jefferson, who penned the most immortal words that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and among them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Proudly, as governor of Virginia, along with our great chairman of the Republican Party of Virginia, Rich Anderson, we cast our delegate votes for the next president of the United States, Donald J. Trump, and his vice president, JD Vance.
Virginia, 42 votes, President Trump. 6 votes to be cast pursuant to the rules and procedures of the convention. Michigan, 55 delegates.
Madam Chairwoman, I rise from the great state of Michigan, where the Republican Party was founded under the Oaks on July 6, 1854.
The roll call of delegates continues here on the convention floor in the Fiserv Forum. Nancy Cook, final thoughts on the day. I mean, it's only half over, so I don't mean your final thoughts. I mean your near final thoughts.
I mean, I think it's just, you know, the last month of the election has been so wild and so surprising, from Biden's performance in the debate to the assassination attempt.
And the intervening 2 weeks of Democratic turmoil about what the debate performance did or didn't mean to the future of the president's re-election bid.
So I just think the tone and tenor of the election is sort of shifting week by week at this point. And it does seem like Trump has a huge advantage at this point, but so much has changed in the last month that, you know, TBD on what happens.
Let me just ask you before you go, Nancy, because it happened this morning, though it feels, because political news moves so rapidly and things that just happened can sometimes feel like they happened so much longer ago than they actually did. There was a significant legal development today.
Yes.
Let us not forget, ladies and gentlemen, we haven't even talked about it, not even for 5 seconds. Eileen Cannon, the district federal judge, dismissed the classified documents case and allegations of obstruction of justice, not only against former President Trump, but the 2 other named defendants. Yes, that can be appealed. Yes, that can be reviewed judicially, but nevertheless, that will be part and parcel of the conversation tonight and throughout this convention.
Absolutely, and legal experts really thought that that was the strongest and most damning case against the former president, you know, that he had kept and hid classified documents in Mar-a-Lago, you know, where club members sort of come and go, you know, during the season.
Not secured as they should be, and there were gentle attempts to retrieve them and conversations and efforts that did not manifest themselves to the satisfaction of the government. Then an FBI raid under a search warrant authorized by a judge, and then the charges, and all of that now, for the moment, legally off the board.
I think that the former President Trump has just had tremendous luck legally in the last 6 months, and part of it comes from, you know, judges and justices he appointed, like his 3 picks for the Supreme Court that ruled in his favor in the immunity case. But also, you know, he's just had tremendous luck with this documents case getting dismissed. You know, the sentencing for his hush money trial in New York, where there were 34 felony convictions, was essentially pushed off because of the Supreme Court ruling. He's just had a lot of things legally go his way.
And speaking of that 34 felony conviction in New York, here at the convention site in Milwaukee, Nancy, I'm sure you've seen them, there are T-shirts that people can and do buy that say, "I'm voting for the felon."
Oh yes, it's a point of pride here. It's not, you know, it's part of this whole narrative that MAGA world feels, you know, that Trump survived 2 impeachment attempts. He's survived these like legal cases where people are trying to drag him down. And now you add to that, he survived an assassination attempt.
Perseverance, a theme here. Nancy Cook, such a great pleasure. Thanks so much for all your help. Lindsay, back to you in New York.
Nancy and Major, thanks so much. Anthony is still here with me. And Anthony, we were discussing here at the Broadcast Center Nikki Haley. She had released her 97 delegates, and you pointed something out to me in the proceedings as we're watching them live.
Yeah, just to kind of button up that earlier conversation, it didn't sound like they actually said Nikki Haley. They didn't. I didn't hear them when they came to states like North Carolina and Virginia, where she, in fact, won a handful of delegates. So what they did was they said, well, pursuant to the rules, those votes will be cast, but they didn't say Nikki Haley. And what I think happens there is they want to show a unanimous front. They want to show a unified front. And so that's how they get that through the rules.
Let's keep pulling at that thread of JD Vance, political newcomer, 39 years old, been Ohio senator, junior senator for a year and a half. Let's go back to 2022. He narrowly won against Tim Ryan. Tim Ryan had actually tried to distance himself from the Democratic Party. JD Vance had tried to tie Tim Ryan to Biden's economic policies, of course, inflation, what people are feeling when they go to the grocery store, et cetera. Vance had never held public office before. He was a Marine veteran, venture capitalist. Remind us of 2022, how close, how expensive that race was, and really what put him over the edge.
Expensive, but I actually want to rewind back to 2012, where I think part of this story begins, which is that Barack Obama won Ohio when he ran for re-election in 2012. Since then, you have seen a shift in Ohio, along with elsewhere, specifically in white working class and white non-college degree holding voters away from the Democratic Party and into the Republican camp. And so go back then to 2022, where J.D. Vance does well among that core, what is now a core part of the Republican Party, of the MAGA base, of Donald Trump's party. And I think what you're going to see is, can he then address or take some of that appeal, build on that appeal for Donald Trump? Donald Trump won 2/3 of white non-college voters nationwide in 2020, right? So can he build on that? Yes, as Major said, as you've said, across the Rust Belt, so to apply the lessons of Ohio out there. And then the second part of that is it might signal a kind of theory of the case, which is that this is a turnout election. And in that sense, Donald Trump and the Republicans are going to try to make sure that every part of what they already have as the base is out there and is motivated. And some of the themes that you've heard J.D. Vance talk about, that you hear Donald Trump talk about the economy, about that kind of populist rhetoric, some call it, those are things that could be motivating. And that, again, speaks to this idea that this election is less about persuasion and more about turnout.
Of course, we continue to watch the roll call here in Milwaukee right now. I believe South Dakota is up, if not New Mexico. We only have a few more states left to go, even though Trump has already reached his delegate count, 1,215 needed. We're going to continue watching the RNC right now, but we are going to take a quick break. Stay right here. You are streaming CBS News 24/7.
Coming up, our series. Wait a minute. Tom, is that you working the camera?
Keep cleaning out of your close-up.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush. What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I used sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Go to the ends of the earth. Reach for the stars.
Yeah, I just took off.
that kind of thing.
Oh, that's pretty good. Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
That Desired Farm, it's a wonderful place to raise children, and it still is.
Promises broken.
Black Americans have been the target of racism and discrimination pretty much from the time they acquired ownership in the land.
Costing black farmers hundreds of billions in generational wealth.
They did everything to make sure we were run off that land.
But communities are uniting to continue the fight.
Collective ownership is powerful.
To keep their land and their dreams alive.
To watch my children play on land that we own means everything.
So land is power.
Most definitely.
40 Acres and a Mule, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
People with developmental disabilities were once sequestered by the hundreds of thousands in institutions.
Many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower.
Disability activists have since torn down barriers blocking them from living at home or in the community.
We conclude that Title II of the ADA requires states to provide community-based treatment for persons with mental disabilities.
But of the 16,000 people who remain in state-operated institutions, half are in 5 states, and Illinois is one of them.
I don't want to live in the institution. It makes me feel discriminated against.
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
I'm John Dickerson. Join me for the Daily Report, weekdays on CBS News 24/7.
Tonight.
What are the delegates here in Milwaukee saying in the aftermath of the Trump assassination attempt?
Then how investigators are trying to determine the shooter's motive and how the shooting is reshaping Trump's convention speech on the CBS Evening.
Good afternoon. It is just about 4 p.m. here in New York, 3 p.m. in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where Donald Trump has officially won the Republican nomination for president. The former president passed the highly coveted threshold of 1,215 delegates during the roll call vote. And in about half an hour, he's scheduled to introduce the convention to his VP pick, Ohio Senator JD Vance, announced this afternoon. The former self-proclaimed Never Trump guy has spent recent months earning the trust of the former president as he auditioned for the role. Vance is a freshman senator from Ohio, a Marine veteran, and he took office last year after working as a venture capitalist. Let's get to CBS News Chief Washington correspondent Major Garrett at the Fiserv Forum in Milwaukee covering the convention. Major, if I'm not mistaken, we are down to just the last 1 or 2 states.
We are indeed. Vermont and Hawaii will round out the formal call of the delegates to complete the process, which you have just outlined, Lindsay, has already become official. Former President Trump is, for the 3rd consecutive presidential cycle, never before happened in Republican Party political history, the nominee of the Republican Party to seek the presidency in 2024. And that history-making 3 in a row is worth noting, worth pausing on for just a second. There have been a lot of very successful Republican politicians who've become president of the United States. Want to go now to the floor of the convention for Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House, to carry on the official announcement of the calling of the delegates. Let's listen into Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House.
387 votes for President Donald J. Trump. Let's make it official. Accordingly, the chair announces that President Donald J. Trump, having received a majority of the votes entitled to be cast at the convention, has been selected as the Republican Party nominee for President of the United States. The chair is pleased to appoint the following to serve as the escort committee for President Donald J. Trump: Eric Trump, Donald Trump Jr., Tiffany Trump, Ivanka
It
Trump.
is officially official. Former President Donald Trump, the Republican Party nominee. You see the delegate total right there on the screen, 2,394, as articulated in an official sense, was in no way in doubt. But these things have an official gloss to them, and the gloss matters historically. Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House of Representatives, presiding over the convention at this stage to make that announcement. What we expect here in the intervening few moments is a vote by the delegates. We are led to believe, and we'll see how it plays out, but we are led to believe it will be by acclamation of the chosen running mate for former President Trump, Ohio Republican Senator JD Vance. Joining me now here in the Fiserv Forum, Hannah Knowles, national political reporter with the Washington Post. Hannah, there is a musical interlude. I'm very glad we have this headset on. Even with the headset, ladies and gentlemen, truth be told, it's pretty loud here, so we will talk through the noise, Hannah. I hope you can hear me and hear me clearly. Your thoughts on JD Vance being added to the ticket? I know in a sense it wasn't a surprise because he was in the final three contenders, but still a significant move for former President Trump.
Absolutely. I think a lot of people thought it would be Vance for a while because he is sort of the guy that you most associate with Trumpism. He's just the essence of what Trump wants his surrogate to be, out there defending his every word, his every move. And you saw, after the shooting this weekend, JD Vance was really out front in criticizing Democrats' rhetoric and linking that to the shooting, even though they're still investigating the motive. So he's really just a bulldog for Trump.
And that is the historical role of any running mate, to be the aggressor. Of course, in the era of Trump politics, there is no one who's more of an aggressor than the former president. That was true in 2016, 2020, and throughout this entire campaign. But Hannah, I think it's just worth noting, as I mentioned, third consecutive nomination for Donald Trump, making him a continuous factor in Republican Party politics, starting in 2015, one that the party has not been able to take its eye off of and not deny. And even though this sounds like, well, of course he's going to be the nominee in Milwaukee, he's still a convicted felon. He faces other felony counts and other criminal charges. As the former leader of the Republican Party in the Senate, the once majority leader, now minority leader, Mitch McConnell, said after the January 6th riot, former President Trump, then the sitting president, was morally and ethically and possibly legally culpable for that riot. All of that as a backdrop would have disqualified anyone else, not former President Trump.
Yeah, I think his nomination did not look inevitable at, the beginning of the primary process. You had a lot of people putting stock in Ron DeSantis, and then once Trump was indicted, that's when his polls really just took off. And a lot of people would say he's gotten a lot of breaks in those criminal cases you mentioned. We saw that just today with the case in Florida that got dismissed. And so, what used to feel like a massive obstacle to his candidacy has kind of melted away in so many ways.
And Hannah, I'm glad you raised that, because for delegates here, and the country sort of asked this question, aren't you ashamed of former President Trump, all these criminal indictments? What they tell me is, no, we're not ashamed of Trump. We're ashamed of what we believe has happened to the justice system going after this political figure. They believe, almost to a person that I've talked to, Hannah, and I encountered this all across the country during the primary and the caucus process, Republicans have internalized this sense that is exactly consistent with the former president's rhetoric, that he is a political leader, he is being attacked judicially, and that's what's wrong, not him.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, the shooting this weekend, that just only intensified this sense that he is under attack on multiple fronts. And I think for a lot of people, that validated this feeling that they've had throughout the election.
How do you think that's going to rhetorically filter through this convention? That sense that he's a target, or he's been assailed, he's been attacked, but now the former president's even announcing through an interview in a newspaper published this morning, the Washington Examiner, that he's rewritten his convention speech, that he wants to have a different tone, a different approach here. How do you think, and we don't know, I'm not asking you to predict the future, but in general, what is your sense of how that's going to filter through at least his approach to this convention?
Yeah, I think my colleagues have reported that the instinct is to kind of dial back the rhetoric rather than dial it up in this moment. And like you said, that is reflected in Trump's plans for his own speech. I think the question is whether everyone speaking over these next few days gets that message, right? I mean, there's a lot of people involved here, a lot of people taking this stage. There's a lot of chances for someone to kind of break from the message of unity.
Hannah, you've done some thorough reporting on the platform. It is a Republican Party platform that they like to say here is shorter, more concise, and I've covered a lot of Republican conventions. I never thought the Republican Party platform was written entirely by lobbyists, but that's sort of one of the talking points here.
Yeah, absolutely.
I covered those party platform. There were lobbyists there, they were party activists, but anyway, that's their orientation to the past. I'm not sure that's exactly true, but that's their talking point. What matters is that this thing is shorter, more concise, but also how it deals with the question of abortion and abortion access in a post-Roe era.
Yeah, and so what they did was they kind of softened the language on abortion. They're no longer calling for an amendment to the Constitution to say that embryos and fetuses have a right to life. They're no longer calling for a 20-week national abortion ban, and they're really framing it as an issue for the states. There's some anti-abortion groups that have still kind of spun this as a win for them, pointing to some of the language, but overall it really is a backing off of some of the provisions they've had on that for so many years.
For so many years and so many previous platforms.
Yeah.
And it is entirely reflective of what former President Trump wants Republicans to say about this issue, knowing that it's not a universal winner and that you've got to win elections and you've got to sort of tiptoe around this a little bit. That platform, from your reading, is somewhat reflective of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, Trump's advisors signaled early on, we want to cut down the platform, in part because they just didn't want to give their opponents ammunition. And they said that in a memo that they laid out. I mean, why would we give these people words to use against us on abortion?
Right, and on other
issues as well.
In the platform as well. And look, Hannah, I know, having covered lots of campaigns, most Americans don't run around carrying the platform of the parties with them and scrutinizing it line by line, but they are a statement of principles, a statement of priorities. And in this sense, it lists the things that Republicans believe have gone wrong under President Biden's leadership, and we're going to hear that from the podium throughout this convention.
Yeah, and I think that the platform as a whole, it's really just Trump's campaign points. I've talked to Republicans who are very supportive of Trump who say, this is a great campaign document. It's not so much a statement of what the Republican Party stands for the next few decades, per se, and it just kind of exemplifies this melding of Trump and the Republican Party. They are one and the same now.
Hannah, as you know, national political conventions are all about cover songs. That's what the rock and roll you hear in the background is. It's a cover of Cheap Trick, I Want You to Love Me. That's not a problem here, ladies and gentlemen. The delegates love former President Trump. Hannah Knowles, Washington Post, thanks so very much for your time and your expertise. Lindsay, back to you in New York.
All right, Major Garrett, thanks so much. So Anthony Salvanto, CBS News Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, still here with me. As we watch, it's really part official and then part pageantry and a party.
Yeah, because what you've got there is a party that has been not just voting for and supporting Donald Trump, but demanding loyalty to him, looking for loyalty to him. You saw that throughout the primaries. Major was talking earlier about the conviction and the T-shirt that he said, I'm voting for a felon. Part of that's really important here, and that is the sense that throughout the primaries, Republican voters told us that they would, A, see him as still fit for office, even if convicted, and they followed through by voting for him as well. But also that narrative that came through, which was that the prosecution was political in nature. And that was something we saw throughout the polling, throughout the primaries, and still today. Once they dismiss that as politically motivated, then it no longer carries the weight of, oh, that's a negative on our candidate. And so that's how you sort of connect those dots between there and then here feeling like he should be not only the nominee, but is fit for office, and why, quite frankly, even after the conviction, the numbers did not move very much in the polling. You got a little bit of a shift away from Donald Trump, from some folks who weren't as sure after the conviction, but it proved to be very transient, because after that first debate, it kind of came back. So not a lot of impact there.
Anthony Salvanto, thank you. And of course, as we continue to watch everything happening on your screen in Milwaukee at the RNC, we are expecting Vice Presidential nominee JD Vance to be introduced within the hour. When that happens, we will take you there live. But we do want to get you caught up on some other news happening, and we will do that right after this break. You're streaming CBS News 24/7.
Coming up, our series. Wait a minute. Tom, is that you working the camera?
Keep leaning out of your close-up.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I used sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Go to the ends of the earth. Reach for the stars.
Yeah, I just took off. That kind of thing.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
That desired farm, it's a wonderful place to raise children, and it still is.
Promises broken.
Black Americans have been the target of racism and discrimination pretty much from the time they acquired ownership in the land.
Costing black farmers hundreds of billions in generational wealth.
They did everything to make sure we were run off that land.
But communities are uniting to continue the fight.
Collective ownership is powerful.
To keep their land and their dreams alive.
To watch my children play on land that we own means everything.
So land is power.
Most definitely.
40 Acres and a Mule, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
People with developmental disabilities were once sequestered by the hundreds of thousands in institutions.
Many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower.
Disability activists have since torn down barriers blocking them from living at home or in the community.
We conclude that Title II of the ADA requires states to provide community-based treatment for persons with mental disabilities.
But of the 16,000 people who remain in state-operated institutions, half are in 5 states, and Illinois is one of them.
I don't want to live in the institution. It makes me feel discriminated against.
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
Welcome back to CBS News 24/7. I'm Lindsay Reiser. We continue to follow multiple major stories. Federal judge and Trump appointee Aileen Cannon has thrown out the indictment charging Trump with mishandling classified documents. Cannon ruled the appointment of special counsel Jack Smith was unconstitutional. We'll have the latest from the convention in just a moment, but first let's bring in CBS News legal contributor and Loyola Law School professor Jessica Levinson to talk about the dismissal of the documents case. So, Jessica, explain this decision and the argument over the special counsel to us.
So this decision is based on a part of the Constitution called the Appointments Clause. And what she says is that Jack Smith was not validly appointed. She basically says there are 2 routes here for appointing somebody. You can either have a superior officer who is appointed by the president and then confirmed with advice and consent of the Senate, or you can have an inferior officer and then you need a statute that authorizes that appointment. What Judge Cannon says is, let's assume that Jack Smith is an inferior officer, so you didn't need advice and consent from the Senate. What she's saying is, I don't see a statute that authorizes this.
What's the difference between an inferior and a principal officer?
It's a great question. It really depends on the level of responsibility you have, the level of independence. It depends on, in some ways, it's exactly what it sounds like in the sense of how much power do you have in the government. So a principal officer, for instance, would be somebody like an attorney general, would be a federal judge. And then an inferior officer might be somebody who is appointed to the Department of Justice, but is not a attorney general. So there is a division in our government between those positions that are Senate confirmable, meaning they're principal, and those that are not, meaning they're inferior positions. But frankly, it's about what it sounds like. It's about how powerful you are and the level of responsibility and duties that you have.
Can the government appeal?
Yes, they can. I expect they will. They're going to appeal up to the 11th Circuit. Already, we have had one of Judge Eileen Cannon's decisions from an earlier iteration of this case dealing with a special master, not a special counsel, that was appealed up to the 11th Circuit. The 11th Circuit said no dice. They overturned her decision. The big question is what the 11th Circuit does here. I will say one thing for those watching at home to know is that Justice Clarence Thomas, in his concurrence in the immunity case that came out on July 1st, really telegraphed a lot of what we see in Judge Cannon's decision. The question is whether or not other members of the court and other members of the 11th Circuit agree with their reasoning.
Could this impact any of the other investigations, and particularly special counsel's prosecution of Trump?
Yes, with respect to Jack Smith. So what Judge Cannon does is she confines her ruling in many ways to Jack Smith and him and how he was appointed. But absolutely, it raises questions for the D.C. election interference case.
Jessica Levinson, thank you. The investigation into the attempted assassination of Donald Trump is focusing on why the gunman did it. One person died, 2 others were injured in the shooting at a Trump campaign rally in Pennsylvania on Saturday. The former president was injured and the gunman was shot and killed by snipers. CBS News correspondent Meg Oliver is following the latest for us from Pittsburgh. So, Meg, what's the latest in the investigation and what are you learning about the victims?
Lindsay, good to be with you. So the latest in the investigation, CBS News has just confirmed that the shooter purchased a box of ammunition with 50 rounds on the day of the attempted assassination of former President Donald Trump. We also know that the FBI believe he acted alone and he was not on the Bureau's radar. As far as a motive, we are still waiting for any news on that. So still a lot of unanswered questions in the investigation. As far as the victims go, there are still 2 here at Allegheny General Hospital in Pittsburgh, including 57-year-old David Dutch, a former Marine corporal who served deployments in both Desert Shield and Desert Storm, and 74-year-old James Copenhaver. They are both still in critical but stable condition, so some good news there. The 3rd victim, 50-year-old Corey Comparatori, witnesses say he died trying to shield his family from gunfire during that rally. He was married to his wife, Helen. They were together for 34 years. He had 2 daughters. They both paid beautiful tributes to him online. His wife saying he died as the hero he always was. His daughter calling him a real live action hero. He was also a veteran firefighter with the Buffalo Township Fire Department. We went there yesterday to talk to his brothers, and they all described him as a family man, somebody who went to church every week. He loved God, and he would take his shirt off his back for his neighbor. His gear is still hanging there. It was in his locker when we first got there, and they have since moved it to outside the building where there's black bunting. The American flag is flying at half staff, and community members are coming to pay their respects, leaving flower bouquets in his honor. He was truly a well-respected and loved member of their community.
It's just so tragic, Meg. All right, we want to show some viewers an image because it shows the shooter's location, where he was believed to be in relation to where Trump was speaking. There are going to be a lot of questions about how this happened. So what are we learning here? What's being pieced together so far?
Well, Lindsay, I hope that image is still up because I think it is so shocking for people to digest. When you look at it, you see the inner circle, right? And that's where it took at least an hour for all of these spectators to get through pretty tight security, right behind the stage. That's where the sniper was, on top of that building. But when you look over just to the left of that, There's that building that was unprotected, less than 400 yards away, where he was able to climb up with an AR-style rifle and take a clear shot less than 400 yards away. That is the burning question. How did they let that happen? We do know that there was a local sheriff or a local sheriff officer, a deputy, that did spot him, and he tried to climb up on top of that building to stop him, but fell off when the shooter turned and pointed his gun at him. It was just moments later that he started firing those rounds. So that is the big question for the Secret Service. Why wasn't that building secure and protected?
Meg Oliver, thank you. Former First Lady Melania Trump is responding to Saturday's assassination attempt on her husband's life. In a statement shared on social media, she said in part, quote, "I am grateful to the brave Secret Service agents and law enforcement officials who risked their own lives to protect my husband," end quote. She also called for unity for people on both sides of the aisle. The White House confirms First Lady Jill Biden spoke to Mrs. Trump on the phone yesterday, but officials didn't share any more details about the call. Well, hundreds of thousands of people around Houston, Texas are still without power 1 week after Hurricane Beryl hit the region. This means many families have been without air conditioning amid a brutal heat wave. Texas Republican Governor Greg Abbott is now demanding an investigation into the main power company's response to the disaster. The company has restored power to roughly 2 million people, but there are growing concerns over future storms. The second day of jury deliberations are underway in Senator Bob Menendez's bribery trial. The New Jersey Democrat is accused of trading political favors for stacks of cash, gold bars, and a luxury car. He has denied all charges and accused prosecutors of targeting him. The 70-year-old did not take the stand in his trial. Let's bring in CBS News New York reporter Alex Gaynor from outside the federal courthouse in Lower Manhattan. So, Alice, has the jury reached out with any requests to review evidence or any questions?
So, Lindsay, shortly after 11 a.m. this morning, the jury sent their second note. They sent one note on Friday. Once they began their deliberations, they were merely asking for a cable charger for the laptop, which is what they use in the jury room to bring up the evidence to look at that. They deliberated about 3 hours on Friday. Today, they started around 9:40. So, again, just after 11 a.m., they sent that second note. And what they said was, quote, "Does a not guilty verdict on a single count require unanimity?" And the judge replied, yes. You have to be unanimous on all counts of the verdict sheet. They've been deliberating now this morning for getting close to 3 hours now. So 2 notes total.
So does that tell you right now that so far they're kind of split?
It would appear that way, but you just never know what's going on in a jury room. You know, sometimes I've sat in on a trial and they send one note like that, and then right after, boom, they have their verdicts. But again, that was shortly after 11 o'clock. We haven't heard anything from them since then, so hard to tell.
So Menendez is facing 16 federal counts. Remind us what the jury must decide and which is the most serious.
That's right. 16 counts for Menendez, 18 counts total for both him and his 2 co-defendants. This is the verdict sheet. Things like conspiracy to commit bribery. He's also facing conspiracy to commit honest services wire fraud. That carries a maximum penalty of up to 20 years in prison. He's also charged with a public official acting as a foreign agent. Another one carries a 20-year sentence. That's conspiracy to commit extortion under color of official rights. So 70-year-old Senator Robert Menendez, if convicted, he is facing decades behind bars. Lindsay?
Alice Gaynor, thank you. Up next, continuing coverage of our top stories, including a federal judge's dismissal of the indictment charging former President Trump with mishandling classified documents. Plus, Florida GOP Congressman Mike Waltz joins us from Milwaukee to discuss that ruling, Saturday's shooting in Pennsylvania, and the opening of the RNC's convention. Stay with us. You're streaming CBS News 24/7.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
Nate has one of the quickest minds I've ever seen.
Tony has a way of making people feel comfortable.
Gail has this unbelievable knack to ask the question that you're asking at home.
I've been told I could talk to a tree, and that's pretty much true.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my 2 good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
It didn't seem like anything could happen, because nothing ever happens in East Palestine, but it did.
Authorities released toxic fumes from 5 derailed train cars.
Resident, please evacuate.
Acute bronchitis due to chemical fumes.
Did you ever have these problems before the derailment?
No, ma'am.
This neighborhood's not safe no more.
We can assure the community that there's not vinyl chloride entering their communities.
Then why are there so many people feeling these various symptoms of bloody noses or difficulty breathing, bronchitis?
That's a hard question to answer.
We're talking about one of the most blatant releases of a mixture of some of the most toxic chemicals that we've seen in America.
I feel like now I have a duty to warn other communities. If my daughter has to watch me die of cancer, at least it saves someone else. This case.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered.
There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original. 48 hours. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform.
You can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Dragon capsule here in space.
Sightseers in space, the thrill of a lifetime.
Seeing the Earth from space, it was so exhilarating.
But the risks that come with the territory.
There have been 4 fatal accidents. That's a 1% fatal accident rate.
Might make you look before you launch.
If you had 1 out of 100 airplanes falling out of the sky, we'd have a public crisis.
Space tourism, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett, live at the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee. Fiserv Forum is the arena. Former President Donald Trump has announced that Ohio Senator JD Vance is his vice presidential running mate. We are awaiting an official announcement and the appearance of Senator Vance right here on the convention floor. Again, I'm Major Garrett. I'm joined here by Olivia Rinaldi, one of our campaign producers and reporters traveling the nation covering the Trump campaign. Olivia, stand by. I just want to let the audience know how this is expected to play out in the coming moments. Senator J.D. Vance, 39, only in the Senate about a year and a half, is expected to be here at Fiserv Forum, make his way to the center of the stage here at the convention, doing so by, if you're looking from the stage left. Why stage left, you might ask yourself? Let me tell you. Because that's where the Ohio delegation is. And this is going to be kind of a rousing welcome for J.D. Vance, making his way first through the Ohio delegation on the way to the center of the stage here in Fiserv Forum. No remarks expected from J.D. Vance, but an appearance that I am quite confident will be an electrifying moment here at the Republican National Convention on its very first day. Then there will be a move to essentially convey the vice presidential nomination to J.D. Vance by acclamation. They will not, as we understand it currently, go through an elaborate state-by-state call of the delegates. Just say it's J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance is former President Trump's pick, and they will do so and ratify it by ratification. I want to bring in Olivia Rinaldi right now. Olivia, as the music plays and we await Senator Vance's arrival, your sense of this moment, not only for former President Trump, but J.D. Vance and what it reflects about their political future together.
This is a huge moment for the Trump campaign, but because the argument we've been talking about the whole time with this vice presidential pick, who it would be, is it going to be someone that is perhaps in a camp that is considered the safer pick? Of Trump campaign officials that I spoke to, Governor Doug Burgum of North Dakota would be considered someone that's the safer pick. You appeal to independence, soft-spoken guy, all of those sorts of things.
Non-controversial in any sort of way.
Exactly. And J.D. Vance, the senator from Ohio, is someone who's seen as a more ambitious pick, as someone who could be seen as the heir apparent to the MAGA movement. So kind of the argument here with
the
this
next generational face.
100%. He's only 39
that Make
years
America
old.
Great
He's one of the youngest picks for vice president. He's only been in the Senate for a year and a half. So for the Trump campaign to choose him really signals what they're thinking about the movement, what they're thinking about where they're at right now, how Trump is feeling about this pick, and moving forward with JD Vance.
And what they're thinking about the electoral map geography.
Absolutely.
In his Truth Social post, former President Trump went into great detail about the states he thought this would matter most, mentioning Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. Others, yes, but those three are central not only to eating into the supposed blue wall that President Biden is relying on so intensely for his re-election bid, but states that were very close in 2016, very close in 2020, and the Trump campaign believes it has a better than even chance of competing in aggressively this campaign cycle.
100%. Part of JD Vance's appeal, if you've read his book, Hillbilly Elegy, it's a story of a working class man, of a man from the Ohio River Valley who grew up in an area where jobs were zapped, where his parents lost jobs and fell into alcoholism and drug use and drug abuse.
As did their friends and friends of their extended family. It was not just a single family event. It was, to JD Vance's writing in Hillbilly Elegy, a regional event.
Absolutely. And he did something, and he went to the military, and then from there had higher aspirations, so then he went to Yale Law School. But he can speak to how the working class, especially in the Midwest, especially in those key battleground states like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, how they feel about the economy. Prices are high. They're struggling. He can really talk about, I'm from Ohio. I've grown up as a working class family, and he can really kind of tap into that. That's something, we know with President Joe Biden, he can tap into that as well in Pennsylvania. It's going head to head there.
And it feels to me, Olivia, that those here in Fiserv Forum, Republican National Committee delegates, Republican grassroots activists nationwide, will be very eager to see a debate between JD Vance and the sitting Vice President Kamala Harris.
Sources have told me who are close to Vance and the Trump campaign, this was one of the key issues. JD Vance really proved himself in the Ohio Senate race in 2022 when he faced off against Tim Ryan. That was seen as a very well-matched Senate race between the two of them, and that debate helped Vance a lot. The Trump campaign talked about that debate performance, talked about how he would be able to go toe-to-toe with Vice President Harris, and the contrast it would show, both youthful figures in their own party, but different visions. And they feel like Vance would be able to very adequately convey that vision.
Olivia, I want to catch the audience up on a couple of developments this afternoon that are worth very much noting. First, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has been granted what he has long requested, Secret Service protection. He has thanked President Biden and those involved in that process at the congressional level who oversee the allocation of Secret Service resources for that decision. Also, Olivia, we have confirmed here at CBS News that there was a meeting here in Milwaukee today between former President Trump and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Do we know anything about that? What can you tell us?
We do know that they did meet here earlier today. It's kind of an interesting thing, especially as in the context of unity that everyone has been preaching, especially after the shooting in Butler, Pennsylvania. And Donald Trump and RFK, we don't know the specifics of their conversations, but one could assume that unity was part of it. This is someone who has drawn the ire of both the Biden campaign and the Trump campaign as they worry about the amount of voters that RFK Jr. would be able to take away from both of their campaigns. He draws from both. At some points, he draws a little bit more from Trump. So that was always a concern of theirs. But it was fascinating to see that Donald Trump actually met with him, had a meeting with him, amid everything else going on after the fallout of that shooting, that he's been meeting with donors and even another presidential candidate. Very fascinating.
And Olivia, it's worth conveying to our audience because sometimes conventions are places where rumors run rampant, and trust me, in the last 5 or 6 hours, there was rampant rumor
We've heard a lot
running.
Of rumors.
Okay, rampant rumor running. Okay, and one of them was, oh my gosh, RFK is here. Is he going to be the pick? Is he going to end his presidential campaign? All sorts of things have a spark of rumor. Reporters like Olivia, reporters like me, we chase them down. We try to find people who know exactly what is or isn't happening. There was some measure of suspense around that rumor. It's been resolved. And importantly, Olivia, via social media, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has conveyed he's not ending his campaign. It was just a meeting with the former president to talk about unity in broad strokes. That's what we know.
Right, that is what we know so far. They did hold that meeting. He is not ending his campaign. He is staying in the race at this moment, as is Donald Trump and as is President Biden by all counts.
And it's significant to me, Olivia, when there are moments when campaigns feel momentum and things moving in their direction, they're a little bit more expansive in what they're willing to contemplate. I'm willing to suggest to you, and please tell me if I'm wrong, a week ago or 2 weeks ago, it would not have been near top of mind for the Trump campaign to have a sit with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. But I think they feel that they can expand things a little bit, that there's a little bit more room to take meetings and have conversations because they feel some wind is at their back for lots of different reasons. Legal, political. The events in Butler, Pennsylvania had worked out quite obviously well for the former president, grievously for one attendee, very jeopardizing health situations for two attendees at that rally. We should never forget those victims. But in the larger sense, it feels that the Trump campaign can do and contemplate things that were not necessarily on the whiteboard 2 weeks ago.
Absolutely. As you mentioned, all of those reasons, legal. The Florida documents case dismissed earlier today, it kind of feels like the third beat, behind what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania, and what happened even just 3 weeks ago at the presidential debate in Atlanta. I mean, there have been successive events that have happened in Donald Trump's favor over the last 3 weeks. They're feeling that, and they are feeling the positive energy around that. The campaign feels very jubilant is a really good word to describe how they're feeling. And because of that, you're right, they are doing some things that are more ambitious. As of a few days ago, sources were telling me that Donald Trump had not made his vice presidential pick, that he wasn't sure, he was still contemplating. There were a few names being thrown out, 5 or 6 names. There was a lot we were hearing. And then all of a sudden this morning, he said, this afternoon rather, said, I'm going to go with JD Vance. An ambitious pick for all of the reasons that we went through, kind of signaling how they feel about this, that perhaps Donald Trump didn't need a Senator Marco Rubio to reach out to Hispanic voters. He didn't need Governor Doug Burgum to reach out to perhaps independent voters with more stability there, messaging, that he can go with a firebrand like JD Vance, because they're feeling so good about where Donald Trump is right now that they feel they can make that type of move right now.
I will let the audience know that we're awaiting the choreography that has been communicated to us. That's not a slight. National Party conventions are choreographed events. They're meant to be. They're meant to have a flow and a look and a sound and a vibration. And what the choreography that we're anticipating is the arrival of Senator J.D. Vance through the Ohio delegation first, which I'm sure will be a rousing welcome, as you would expect, and then rising to the stage. Before we go to take a quick break, I want to show you a photo that is just appeared on social media via Jason Miller, a top Trump campaign associate, of the redone campaign plane that has Trump, and there you're beginning to see the outline of Vance. Campaign planes are a big part of American modern political history. That is absolutely true in the Trump sense. The Trump plane is, for those who support the former president, something that they very, very much love to see, rally around, and now it will have the name Vance in addition to Trump. Control room, let me know. Are we going to Caitlin Huey Burns? We're going to take a quick break. We're going to take a quick break, so the prompter says. We're going to take a quick break. Back to here in Milwaukee, the Republican National Convention in just a minute. Stay with us, please.
Washington is the seat of power. National security, foreign policy, global economics, every story comes through Washington in some way. We bring some of the most powerful voices in America to the table. We don't just ask the questions, you have to go deeper. We try to understand what's at the heart of the issue we're talking about, to then come forward with solutions.
Face the Nation on CBS.
The
justices ruled that Harvard and the University of North Carolina violated the Constitution.
In the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision to end affirmative action in college admissions, uncertainty sets in for some students of color.
Affirmative action really gave us an equal opportunity.
CBS Reports explores the historic decision and what it means for those chasing an opportunity to change their lives.
I knew that college was the ticket to break this cycle.
The end of affirmative action, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail. What do you say to those in your party?
Any cracks in the Republican Party?
Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions.
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024?
Let us help you decide.
America Decides on CBS News 24/7.
Stream our expanded one-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
They can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7 that is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable. The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We are about to see American weapons in the hands of Mexican cartels.
A gun pipeline to Mexico.
We are arming the cartels. 100%, no doubt about it.
Happening right under our noses.
Who's doing something about this? Nobody.
A CBS Reports exclusive.
Most Americans have no idea that we are effectively arming the enemy next door. This is the story the American people need to know.
Arming cartels, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to the Republican National Convention here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Fiserv Forum is the arena. Caitlin Huey-Burns joins me now. Caitlin, as you well know, national conventions have great cover bands. There's a good cover band here playing a Steely Dan favorite, Reelin' in the Years. I only mention that because it's a nice rendition. But Reeling in the Years is kind of a low-level, soft description of nostalgia, which has always been part of the Trump movement. Make America great again, that there is something being lost in our culture or our economics or our way. And that's very consistent with what Trump has been saying to the country and appealing to Republicans on the basis of starting in 2015.
And I can't help but note, Major, that the way we started this year in a primary process where you still had Republican rivals going after Donald Trump. Nikki Haley, of course, was the last person standing. And I'm curious what you think, but being on the ground here, this party feels more than unified. It feels extremely energized, excited, and especially in the events over the past 36 hours, we know that's hovering over everything, but Republicans I've been talking to here say they're mindful of it, but we're eager to be here, to kind of be amongst each other, to kind of celebrate this moment in history.
What I've detected, Caitlin, is something I would describe as passionate tenacity. There is always a conversation, and particularly in presidential campaigns, about grassroots activism and people who are willing to make the extra phone call, knock on the other next door, do more canvassing, do more voter outreach. Those things are fundamental. They're part of the blocking and tackling of any successful presidential campaign, particularly in states of electoral importance in terms of the electoral votes, but also in the closeness. And we will have 6 or 7 or possibly 8 that will be very close. That extra added value of energy matters a great deal. And what I detect here is a sense of passionate tenacity, like we're really redoubling our efforts because we think this is a moment, not only for former President Trump, but where he stands astride America and his political future. And they feel part of it in a way that I haven't even detected it well, we didn't have a convention in 2020, but in 2016, there was still a bit of an arm's length relationship between the Republican Party then and incoming candidate to be nominee Donald Trump. No more. It's now a bear hug.
It feels like the effort to make this Republican Party the MAGA party is complete. It really feels like that on the ground here, not only from elected officials coming to Trump's side, not only the kind of olive branches extended to people like Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley by giving them speaking moments here, but I was talking to one Republican lawmaker earlier today who said that they believe not only the messages coming out of this convention, but also the assassination attempt at a political rally can speak to people who may not have been inclined to the message, speaking to people who may not like Donald Trump and what he says, but may be more aligned with the policies. They believe that this can really, reach out to those voters and bring them into the fold. We'll see. We'll see if that happens. I mean, we still have over 3 months to go until voters actually weigh in here. But if Republicans were looking for a moment to project that kind of strength, as you and I have talked about as a core campaign message, that is what they're at least hoping to achieve.
And let's stitch together those 2 points, one that I made and one you made, Kaylin. You need that grassroots of activism. Then you need a resolution to this question. Will people not inclined, not warmed to the Trump message, not warmed or motivated by the Trump persona, find some way to cross over? Well, one of the ways that happens is they get contacted by people. And the people here say they are now newly motivated to do that kind of outreach. Not conclusive, but you don't get it. You don't get that crossover without that effort.
Right.
And I think here it feels very distinctly to me that effort is not going to be a problem. That these people feel like the effort is worth their time and they're going to put it forth. Whether that succeeds or not, an open question to be resolved later. But things often start with energy at the beginning.
And I wonder what kind of impact that will have on people who have described themselves as reluctant Trump supporters, those who may not come out and wear the red cap or join in a rally or attend a rally. I'm curious how what we've seen over the weekend, what we're about to see this week, whether that brings those people into a more comfortable position of supporting the former president.
We are frequently blamed in the media for oversimplifying and maybe taking metaphors that are misplaced and just sort of jamming them on top of a scenario, sometimes awkwardly. That's a fair criticism. But I would offer an observation that might be that or might not. It seems to me one of the tests of this convention will be afterward. Will people who attend their children's soccer games or church encounters or at restaurants feel more comfortable talking about Trump and Republican Party politics than they might have 2 or 3 weeks ago?
Yeah. It's interesting because, and I know you likely hear this as well, every time I talk to Republican operatives, they talk about the suburban vote, but also they kind of reference, sitting at your kid's soccer game and the political conversation, and I understand the speaker is here.
We're gonna toss to Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House, because JD Vance, nope, not JD Vance. Oh, Brenna Byrd, who is the Attorney General of Iowa, is now approaching the podium. And we are awaiting, the reason we jumped in, we are awaiting JD Vance's arrival.
For the office of Vice President of the United States, Senator JD Vance.
Why don't we liberate these United States? We're the ones who need it worst. Let the rest of the world help us for change, and let's rebuild the very first. Wow. Our highways and bridges are falling apart. Who's blessed? Who has been cursed? There's things to be done. Let's rebuild America first. who's in charge of it all. God bless the Army and God bless our liberty. That got the rest of it all. Yeah, I'm in position of backing away. Freedom is stuck in reverse. Let's get out of Iraq, get back on the track, and let's rebuild America first. Once more. Why don't we liberate these United States? We're the ones who need it the most. You think I'm blowing smoke? Boys, it ain't no joke. I make 20 trips a year coast to coast.
Ohio Senator JD Vance making his way ever so slowly to the center podium here at Fiserv Forum. When you are representing yourself as a vice presidential nominee of the people, what you do is spend ample time with delegates of your party, which Senator Vance is quite clearly doing. You see right near him his wife Usha. They met at Yale University, students there. Senator Vance had a distinguished academic career at Yale and at Ohio State University. It is worth noting that as he was making his way through the Ohio delegation, 2 bear hugs with the sitting governor, Mike DeWine. Also worth noting that JD Vance in the United States Senate took the seat of Rob Portman, a decidedly bipartisan Republican senator. Previously, before being in the United States Senate, served in the George W. Bush administration, a kind of personification of that Republican establishment of old. Republican establishment that, as a candidate in 2015 and in pursuit and capturing of the Republican nomination in 2016, Donald Trump vanquished, or at least began the process of vanquishing, which, to Caitlin Huey-Burns' point just a moment ago, has now been fully vanquished. The establishment Republican Party of George H.W. Bush and George W. Bush is no longer. It is, in any way, shape, or form, within a Trump Republican Party. There may still be some advocates, but they have a diluted voice, and they do not play the central role that they once did.
When this pick was announced, I was texting with some Republican operatives who I would describe as very MAGA Republicans of the Steve Bannon-esque type of mold, and they were cheering this decision. This is a decision that really galvanizes the base. But I will also say, talking to Republicans in Vance's orbit, those who have worked with him on campaigns and seen him campaign, note that what you just saw right there, Vance with his wife, present a generational change. That's a huge contrast, of course, to the top of the ticket. And also, they believe that his connections could be in the suburbs as well. Because of what you mentioned, we all know his biography, but his pedigree also, they believe, makes that outreach.
Caitlin Huey-Burns, thank you so very much. We're going to take a very quick break. Please join me at the top of the hour for continuing coverage live from the Republican National Convention right here on America Decides. You are streaming CBS News 24/7.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy. And reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun. But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking.
I'm open to the idea of being a human being.
Innovative and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
For 1 hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Don't miss true crime anytime you want, anywhere you go. With the 48 Hours podcast. Real crimes, real lives, real justice.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Listen to 48 Hours on Apple Podcasts.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Imagine yourself in Manhattan with no police, no army, no mayor.
The people of Haiti stare down poverty, corruption, natural disasters, and